My church is doing a parenting class and they asked me to speak on adoption. I'm adopted and I'm grateful for my family, but I still wrestle with not knowing my biological parents. Is it okay to admit that?
Yeah, it is. It's okay to be honest, and you are honestly where a lot of adopted children are. Depending on how old you are, you might have been told that it's not okay to be honest about that. I think that a lot of the kids that were adopted in the 70s, 80s, maybe even in the 90s, were kind of messaged that this solves all your problems. And you're really lucky that you got adopted by this couple. They saved you. And that's not really helpful to kids who then go on to experience some kind of questions about their identity or feelings like I'm not as fully attached, to my parents as maybe I see my biological siblings being attached to them. I actually think we've done a major disservice to both adopted children and adoptive parents by telling them that this is the fix all, because it very often is not. Very often, there are wounds there that won't be healed on this side of heaven. Now, you can say that either in your talk, or you can say that, average listener, when someone's talking with you about adoption, and still recognize that when it's properly constructed, adoption is redemptive. Adoption is a just society's response to children who have lost their families, and it's very, very good. But that doesn't mean that it fixes everything.
Yeah, I think it's so important for adoptees to be able to share their story and to help educate other people in the church that here's the redemptive things about it and here are the things that are really difficult. Especially, like you said, so many are open now, and so people have probably varied experience with how much do they know their birth families. And so for this person, they're saying they don't know their biological parents, which is a little more rare. And I think it's helpful to say, here's the challenges I have with not knowing them. So when you adopt a child and maybe, well, like you've shared, I think, there's some places where you adopt where there just isn't information about the birth family. And so you
Yeah.
aren't going to know any information, even if you went to a 23andMe or something. So I think it's really good for people to be able to share the breadth of the experiences that someone could have. So people going into adoption as adoptive parents can be aware and be ready for their kids. Talk about being an expert. You need to be an expert on adoption, especially if you're thinking you're adopting across ethnic lines or cultural lines, or maybe they're older or younger, so they have different experiences. I think adopted parents would really do a good job if they work really hard to try and equip themselves with all the things that their kids are going to be struggling with.
It's interesting because I speak a lot to a lot of different groups and a lot of different places. And I'm an adoptive mom. And I don't come into this conversation the way a lot of kind of Christians, conservatives, even pro lifers do, which is saying adoption is it solves everything. Like adoption is the answer to an unplanned pregnancy, for example, which the answer is no. The answer to an unplanned pregnancy is parenting. If you have an unplanned pregnancy, you parent the baby. In situations where you're unwilling, then adoption is, a justice oriented option so the child doesn't have to lose their right to life. But I go into it recognizing that adoption can be very challenging. And a lot of people respond to that by saying, don't say that. You shouldn't say that because it'll push people towards abortion, or they feel like they need to be protective of their friends who have adopted or their friends who are adopted. Because if they're like, if you say anything about negative about adoption, you're harming adoptive parents or adoptive children. But it's interesting because at the end of those talks, very, very often adopted children come up to me and say, that's exactly how I feel. I love my mom and dad, but I'm so curious about who my birth mother is, or that's how I feel. I just always feel like I'm about to be abandoned. And my adoptive parents never gave me any reason to think I would be abandoned. I just always have this fear that everyone's going to leave me. Or the adoptive mothers come up and talk to me and they say, we got this baby from day one, or we got this baby 2 years old out of foster care and we gave them everything. We treated them no differently than our biological children. But they're somewhere out on the street addicted to fentanyl. And I just don't understand. And so even though the rest of us feel like we kind of need to smooth over the rough spots of adoption, the people that are involved in adoption themselves are often the ones that say, yes, there is something here that even two loving Christian parents can't fully mend. And it's okay to be honest about that.
So much of our Them Before Us work, I think, is trying to navigate the lines between we have to be able to say and point to an ideal And that doesn't mean that the people who are doing their best and sacrificing for children in the not ideal situation are bad people. So we have to say marriage is between one man and one woman. Children do absolutely best raised by those two individuals. And then inevitably someone who's a single mom or step parent will say, basically, how dare you? I'm doing my best. It wasn't my fault, or I stepped in, I sacrificed and did the right thing. And we're like, no, we're 100% on your side. You are sacrificing and doing the right thing. But people in those situations who understand the them before us perspective would agree with us. This is not the ideal, that I'm a single mom and my kids don't know where their dad is or what to do. And that's one of the questions we're going to address in a few minutes. Or they understand I'm adopting and this is a good redemptive thing and I'm sacrificing. But this is really difficult for my child that I just adopted who lost their biological mother and father. We have to be able to balance and talk about both.